Hey, what is going on guys, Rivet Stealth here, and in today's video we have the top lane tier list for patch 9.5. So to start it off here is going to be the Niko top lane pick. So very sleeper OP pick right now in this patch and in last patch as well. I did make a separate video on this going more in depth into the pick. So if you want to see that video and you haven't yet, I'll leave an annotation on the top right hand corner of the screen here. But the Niko top pick, really good right now. It has very good matchups in the top lane. It did even get buffed in this patch as well, so it gets even stronger for 9.5. The main reason to why it works really well is because you go for this on hit build on the Niko top lane, you go for Rageblade, Blade the Ruined King, and the synergy between Rageblade and attack speed items with your W is really good. The W damage, the W movement speed that you get from this on hit build is really good, and you do go for the W max first on this Niko top lane. So pretty much into any melee champion, especially into melee champions that don't have a gap closer, Niko destroys them in the laning phase. So she just overall has a pretty good laning phase, also scales pretty nicely into the mid to late game. Now for the build on Niko, even though in my video I said that Rageblade Rush is what most of the higher elo Niko players were doing right now, Blade the Ruined King first item is actually doing a lot better so far in this patch, and it is what a lot of the pro players are running on their Niko top lane. So many more pro players are picking up this champion now in this patch, so that's what they're doing right now, going for Blade the Ruined King into Rageblade and then situational from then on out. So next up here is Silas in the S tier for 9.5. He did get a buff and a nerf in this patch. I think it did end up being a net positive change to Silas, at least if you are building AP Silas. You no longer really want to go for the tank Silas in this patch, at least it's not performing as well as going for something like a Proto Belt into Zhonya's or Proto Belt into Lichbane. That build does seem to be doing best right now on Silas for 9.5. Silas just overall has really good skirmish potential. He's one of the best champions in 2v2s, especially once he does hit level 6 and when he can steal an ultimate. He just has a ton of sustain. Like even if you drop really low on HP, the heal that you can get, it's absolutely insane, and I can just turn a 2v2 really easily. So he's just overall a great champion in this current meta, to where Scuttle Crab is pretty important. You're going to be getting into those skirmishes in the early game and you can win a lot of them with Silas. And then with the W changes in this patch, Q max is also doing much better on Silas for 9.5. The W changes, it's no longer as good to max because the base damage did end up getting nerfed quite a bit once you do hit max rank in it, so it's just more worth it in this patch now to max Q out first on Silas. And then even though Conquer was a rune that Silas top lane and mid lane did take when it first got released, after the Conquer nerfs, Grasp is just much better and much more consistent on your Silas top lane now. So if you're still running Conquer, I would definitely switch over to Grasp for this patch. So Yorick is still holding on to S tier for 9.5, did receive 2 nerfs in this patch, which did hit him a little bit. It dropped him out of like the god tier status that he was in previous patches, but he's still an S tier pick in my opinion. Still the god of the low elos. Like if you're looking for a champion to climb out of lower elos right now in the top lane, I would still be playing Yorick. He still does really good with Conquer as well. You can run Grasp on him like in different matchups as well. If the matchup is harder, if you're up against like a more lane bully bruiser and you just need a bit more sustain for the early game, then you can run the Grasp. But if you're in easier matchups, if you're confident on your Yorick, then the Conqueror is still going to be a great choice on him. As long as you don't die in the first few levels with Yorick, if you can survive the early game, just farm up, hit your level 6, then at that point you win most matchups. And from then on, once you do get your Trinity, your Sterix, and if you get like your ZZ Rod as well, your split push is absolutely insane. You're going to be able to turn a lot of 1v2 scenarios with Yorick in the side lane, and you can just draw a lot of pressure for your team to get objectives on the other side of the map. Another champion remaining in the S tier for 9.5 is Riven, and Riven, quite surprised she didn't get nerfed in 9.5 as she is performing, or she has been performing very well over the past few patches, but she's still a great pick right now. I guess she did get indirectly nerfed in this patch with the Conquer changes, but Conquer is still great on Riven. You still want to run it on her, and it is still a great rune on the champion. Spiritosian though right now on Riven as a rush item just makes her absolutely insane. Spiritosian into Death's Dance is what most of the high elo Riven Riven players do right now, and it just allows you to take over in the side lane. Once you get Spirit Sojin, your 1v1 potential into most matchups is very strong. I would go far enough to say that Riven is the best solo carry top laner for 9.5 as long as you can play her at a decent level. She is going to take a few games to get used to for sure, but I even think that right now, even if you don't have a ton of games on Riven, because the champion is just so strong, you can still have a lot of good success on her. So Vladimir, another champion staying in the S tier for 9.5, best blind pick top laner for 9.5 in my opinion. This champion doesn't really have any super hard matchups for the laning phase, or at least he's never really gonna lose lane as long as you can just farm up in the laning phase with your Q, use your ranged advantage into melee matchups, and just look to pull away if any melee champion tries to dive onto you. Then you are gonna have a lot of success on Vladimir. You're gonna scale extremely well into the late game, one of the best scaling top laners in the game. So as long as you just don't die in the early game, don't give the enemy an advantage, then you're going to outscale most top laners in the game. And then Vlad does somewhat get indirectly stronger for 9.5 because with Conquer top laners getting nerfed in this patch, those champions tended to do pretty well into Vlad, or at least they could abuse his weaker early game because picks like Renekton, Jax, Riven, they could have some good success at just bullying out Vladimir in the first few levels, but with those champions dropping down a little bit in 9.5 here, it does make Vlad a tad bit stronger. And then to round up the S tiers for this patch is going to be Jax. So Jax, another patch in the S tier here for the champion. He's still great in this patch despite the Conquer nerfs. The Conquer nerfs did drop him down a little bit, but just not enough to drop him out of S tier. He's still insanely strong with Spirit Sojin. His 2-item spike of Trinity Force and Spirit Sojin makes him absolutely insane there in the 1v1 and in this side lane. And he's a champion that is pretty solid at all stages of the game. His early game isn't even that weak, although I guess you would say it's probably his weaker stage of the game. His mid game is absolutely insane. He scales pretty well into the late game as well, so he's overall just a very solid champion for solo queue for 9.5. So for my A tier for 9.5, we do have Nasus moving down out of S tier, mainly due to the fact that we've got a few other champions moving up, like the Silas and the Niko. Those picks do very well into Nasus. Also, some of the other most picked top laners right now, like the Yorick and the Darius, do very well into the Nasus. So I just don't think he's as blind pickable as he was in previous patches, and that's something that I do look for a lot in the S tier champions. So if you are looking for a good tank pick for this patch, Chogath is performing a lot better after the buffs he got in 9.5. He got the buff to his E there, which does increase his damage by quite a bit once you do get that maxed out especially. So if you are auto-filled top lane, if you're looking for a tank to round out your team comp, then I would say that Chogath right now is probably your best bet for that full tank top laner. And then most of the other picks here, I'm pretty sure, have been A tier for a few patches in a row, so there's not really too many champions moving up or down out of A tier or into A tier for 9.5. And then for the B tier for 9.5, Gangplank, even though he did get buffed in this patch, they just weren't really enough to jump him out of B tier. If you're very experienced on Gangplank, if you played him a ton, then you could probably argue that he's an A tier pick for this patch, but for the majority of players, for the average player, I just don't think Gangplank really gets better for 9.5. His matchups against the most picked top laners are still very bad. He still struggles a lot against pretty much all the S tier champions in this patch, does pretty bad into the Riven and into the Jax, who are picked a ton, so I just still don't think he's very reliable for solo queue for 9.5. So for Gnar here, I am finally moving him out of C tier for this patch. He got direct buffs last patch. He also is doing a lot better as more people transition over to running fleet footwork on him. He's doing much better with that rune compared to any other keystone right now. So if you are a Gnar player, definitely look to try out that rune on him for this patch. It just gives him a much stronger laning phase, allows him to kite out certain matchups that he might have struggled with in previous patches, and it just does give him a little bit more sustain there for the laning phase. And the Kayle pick, I'm not really rating her much higher than B tier for this patch. She might be an A tier champion right now, but it's just really hard to gauge as to how strong a champion is when they do get released. Usually I don't even include the champion. Like if a champion gets reworked, I usually don't even include them in the tier list if I do one for that patch. So don't really look too much into Kayle like being in B tier. You could argue for A tier for this patch for her, but I think that she's definitely in the range of B or A tier for 9.5. And then for C tier for 9.5, these champions here I would be staying away from for this patch. One that you might be a little bit more surprised about is the Urgot pick, but Urgot, he did get those nerfs last patch and they did really hit him very hard. I originally thought that with the Conquer introduction and the synergy between Conquer and Urgot's W that change would save him from the nerfs, but Conquer's just not as good for Urgot as it seems on paper, and the nerfs just really did bring him down, so I would be staying away from Urgot in solo queue for this patch. So that is going to be all for the video, guys. That is the top lane tier list for patch 9.5. So if you guys did enjoy this video, then as always, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.